But what is not going to be a setback is my man Carl Jha, who is awesome. You like that turnaround, that transition? Carl, my man, how you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jamar?
I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm not going to complain. I'm glad that you could join me, man. I always appreciate these conversations. I always learn something from you in these conversations. I want to hit 2 topics, maybe 3. One, definitely the trade war. The second one has to do with Taiwanese independence and the Philippines. There is, in fact, let's go to the Philippines first since I have the video up. I might as well ask you about it. This video came out, and in the video, they point out this could lead to a major escalation in the Philippines. Now, I don't exactly know what they're saying, so I'm just going to show the flag that being raised over what they're calling, what is the name of it? It's not a shoal, it'll come to me in a moment. But that little patch of land.
Sandy Cay.
What is it called?
It's literally called Sandy Cay. Sandy, okay. like the sand beach. Sandy Cay, yeah.
Sandy Cay.
Sandy Cay okay. Reef.
So they have raised the flag over that area. And apparently the Philippines are pissed. Now, will the Philippines end up like Ukraine? It's probably the question that should be asked, right? Because there's no way the Philippines can, in any way imaginable, contest the Chinese.
Well,
what is going on with that?
Well, I mean, after watching Ukraine getting wrecked for 2 years, and Philippines still decides to plunge ahead and be the next proxy, I mean, there's nothing I can say about that. I mean, it takes extraordinary stupidity to follow the example of Ukraine. What we have in the Philippines is we have a group of oligarch families who have been controlling the politics of the countries for forever, pretty much, and before and after the end of American colonization of the Philippines. And right now, before we had Duterte, who for once piloted an independent foreign policy away from the United States, improving ties with China, getting closer to Russia, but he's been punished for it. Right now, he's sitting in. Yeah. He got extradited. Yeah, right. He got extradited to ICC. Once again, proved that ICC is only for brown people. They're obviously not going to get Netanyahu. It's designed for the jungle, right? To get the brown people, not the white people or Netanyahu, people like that. So, I mean, that was an act of revenge by the United States, basically, to make Duterte an example for anybody who kind of defied U.S. hegemony. And so now we have Mama Marcos, who has been towing the U.S. lines. Not the least reason is because his daddy's ill-gotten fund, something to the tune of more than $30 billion, is being frozen by United States. If he ever want to see any of that, he will have to be in the good grace of U.S. government. And so here we are. Philippines, China, they used to have a gentleman's agreement back in 2014. That was even before Duterte's term. And we just says, okay, we'll put aside our differences. China will allow the Philippine Navy to continue to supply their half dozen Marines stranded on a reef, provided that they do not bring building material trying to do land reclamation project and try to harden the military bunkers, etc. But, of course, Bamba Marco claims he had no prior knowledge of such agreement, and he's being, he's making Philippines a linchpin of U.S. Strategy in South China Sea to provoke China, and this is China's response. What China did, that was China's response. So you have first Tony Blinken went over to the Philippines and said, we have an ironclad commitment to the Philippines, including South China Sea. And then you have the latest Trump Secretary of Defense Pete, whatever his name is,
Hexa, yeah.
went to the Philippines, said the exact same thing. We have ironclad commitment to the Philippines. Well, China says, well, okay, let's see what you mean by that. Here is a reef. So here's a reef. We're gonna put our flag on it. And so first of all these islet or natural features in the Philippines, they have been in dispute for over half a century. You know, the Philippines entered into the dispute around 1950s when a Filipino businessman claimed that he quote unquote discovered the Spratly Islands, and then he actually founded his own republic, and then Philippine government officially tried to buy him out in the 1970s. So that's how this. Whereas China had always claimed these islands, you know, since the Qing dynasty. So this is how the dispute got started. But what's important about that Sandy Cay is it's a natural feature, and it sits just barely above the sea level during the high tide. So that's actually an important point, because when it's a natural feature that sits above the sea level during high tide, according to the United Nations Law Convention of the Sea, the country who controls such a feature are entitled to a special economic zone 200 nautical miles around that feature. So China is like, okay, we are putting our flag here. What are you going to do, United States? You know, you claim you have ironclad commitment. You are goading Philippines on. Let's see what you got. I mean, I don't think U.S. will not do anything besides the rhetoric, because U.S. plan for the Philippines has always been, this is our excuse to pivot back to Asia, to get access to the 9 Filipino bases we already have access to, and to put the Typhoon missile on the Philippines where we can threaten China, because the range of Typhoon missile is such that it covered much of the southern China. And initially they said, oh, we just brought those Typhoon missile here for our joint exercise. We'll take them away after exercise is over. Well, that was last year. Those Typhoon missiles are still there in the Philippines. And so you know, they're not going away anytime soon. And then Filipino government actually said, oh, we actually think about buying them from the US. But just like how the missiles were operated in Ukraine, those missiles are not going to be operated by the Filipinos. They're going to be still operated by US servicemen, except Trump is going to make the Filipinos pay for it, right? He's going to, like, Filipino are literally paying for the privilege of staying stationed U.S. troops on their soil and hosting U.S. missiles. Whether that's going to blow up into a hot kinetic war, I highly doubt it, especially after the development of the last few weeks. I'm talking about the Tariff war, because at this point, I said this on Twitter. It caused a big ruckus. I said, U.S. has neither the balls nor the means to start a hot war with China right now, because I mean, it's pretty obvious when China is making everything, including the vital parts that Pentagon needs to keep its military-industrial complex running. How the heck are you going to do a hot war? And by the way, a lot of Americans haven't felt the true impact of the tariff war yet, because someone pointed out on Twitter, Mosen Hart, he's American, doing importing educational toys from China. He said it takes 30 days for the ship to cross the Pacific from ports of China to the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. So what happened on April 30th is there's a steep drop in ships leaving ports of China heading to U.S. There's a 30 days gap. So this disruption in the supply chain won't hit Port of LA and Long Beach until May 10th, you know, in a couple of weeks. And in a couple of weeks, things are going to be really bad, because we're going to have truckers basically out of work in the West Coast. And you know, it's another 50 days for New York. So New York on the East Coast, they're going to hit a little bit later. They're going to see the effect in the late May, early June. So this summer is going to be really, really bad, unless, well, I think it's too late. I was going to say unless Trump roll back the tariff right now, but I realized, no, that's too late, because remember, there's still a 30 days gap So even if the Chinese supplier says, okay, let's let bygones by bygones, we will continue to produce. We pretend nothing bad happened. We'll continue to send our order to ship to you. Guess what? It takes another 30 days. So this summer is shot. This from May to June is going to be really, really bad in the United States. This is equivalent of Trump doing a shock therapy, Gorbachev style, but except in US. And we're going to see, empty shelves. People don't realize 80% of antibiotics used in the United States is produced in China. A lot of the medical equipment,
I did not know
hospital use. A lot of medical equipments, medicines that's used in hospital come from China. This is going to have serious issues. We talked about the tariff war before. I said tariff could be useful to help your domestic manufacturing if you have domestic manufacturing in place. If you don't have the supply chain, what the heck are you going to do, in the time span that you need to actually set up the supply chain? It takes a few years to build out a complete supply chain. I'm being very optimistic here, a few years. I mean, in some industries, it will take probably decades. China took 40 years to get where they are now. They built out their supply chain in the last 40 years. Trump is not going to get that done in a few, what he said, 90 days? What he said, 90 days?
With Russia, by the way. They had to build out their supply chains. Like, it took them a while to get insulated from the sanctions. It wasn't overnight. And just to back you up on this, empty shipping. That's one of the interesting things that I was reading about. Like, how imports were down like 6%. Then they were like empty ships. Apparently, Walmart, Target, all of these places went to China, went to Trump saying, "Hey, what are you doing? You're killing us." There were even situations where the question is Walmart, Target, and some of these places going to pay for it themselves? Like, are they going to take the hit for the cost and just pass it to the consumers because their business model relies on Chinese imports? It's going to be a mess. You're absolutely right.
This is why we have seen some walk back from Trump, right? I mean, he got a call. He got a call from Tim Cook of Apple, right? Like, Apple, it's like, what the hell are you doing? Slapping import. That means our iPhone can't get to the US. So he's like, oh, okay, sorry, my bad. I'm gonna put an exemption on electronics. So now what Apple is gonna do is they're gonna shift just enough. The plan to shift just enough iPhone production to India, so Americans will get special made in India iPhone, while the rest of the world will continue to get the iPhone made in China. So because India already makes, they already make about anywhere from 15 to 20% of iPhone in India. So their goal is to make 26% of their iPhone in India, and that will just be enough to supply the US market only. But again, how is that bring manufacturing job back to the United States? That's just shifted the production from China to India. Why are these Trump supporters celebrating that as a big win? You're not getting those manufacturing jobs back, and you're just getting made in India iPhones. That's all you're getting.
Oh, that's so silly, and you're so right. Because, it's like the entire point of the sanctions, according to Trump, was we're going to bring manufacturing back to the States. Okay, well, you're doing jobs in India. Does that make India great again, right? It's supposed to make America great again. Oh, man. By May 30th, June, oh, man, it's going to hit. All hell is going to break loose.
It's going to be bad.
That is going to be bad. That is going to be very bad.
I mean,
what is the Chinese reaction to this, by the way?
Well,
oh no, please.
Chinese reaction has been. The Chinese reaction has been pretty. They're just carrying on doing what they're doing. Xi Jinping is not going to make that call. Xi Jinping is busy traveling throughout Southeast Asia because China has been preparing for this moment since 2018, since the first Trump administration, the first Trump term, started slapping sanctions on China, and that was a wake-up call for China. That was a big shock. Somebody has said if back in 2018, if Trump had coordinated with quote unquote European allies and put the squeeze on China, there might be a chance. There might be a chance to force China to make a concession, but now it's too late. That ship already sailed, because China was in 2018 when the first Trump sanction was levied against China. China got a wake up call, and since then, and you have Biden doubling down on the chip sanctions. China has been de-risking, decoupling from United States, and they already saw that as a eventuality. This is why they're not too bothered about this. They have already prepared for this decoupling from the United States. That's why Xi Jinping is traveling to Southeast Asia, because Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries, are now China's largest trading partners, replacing the United States. This is what China has been doing. China, at one point, China's export, export counted 32% of China's GDP at a certain point. But now export only accounts for 19% of China's GDP, which is comparable to countries like Germany, even lower than Germany and Japan. And out of that 19%, only 15% goes to United States. So if you do the math, it comes out 3%. 3% of China's GDP is directly tied to export to United States. And China said, you know what? It's okay. We can take a hit. We can redirect. We can redirect those. And you know what? Trump administration keep on saying they need our money. We have the upper hand because they need our market. We need our money. Well, guess what? Money is fungible, right? Government can literally print money, and China has been holding off on doing stimulus. During the burst of real estate bubble, all the foreign investors are screaming at the Chinese government, say, you need to do stimulus now. You need to stimulate the economy. But Chinese government didn't do that. They didn't do like a bailout like what the U.S. did to the big banks after 2008 financial crisis. So that means China has kept its powder dry. Now, if they want to do stimulus, they have room to maneuver. They could do stimulus, and also, this is what people don't understand. And there's also other markets that China can sell their products to.
Right there.
Now, today, I need to remind people: China's middle class have reached 400 million people. That's larger than the entire population of the United States. And if you look at the China's economic indicators, China's electric generation is twice the amount of United States. They generate twice as much electricity as United States. If you look at the car market, China's the world's largest car market right now. They sell twice as many cars in China than they do in the United States. So I don't believe that the nominal GDP crap anymore that says China's economy is still smaller than the United States. I don't believe that. I mean, by all indications, I even think the PPP accounting, the purchase power parity accounting, which says Chinese economy is about 1.5 times the size of the United States, I think that's even too conservative. I think we're looking at China right now. It's probably about twice the size of the U.S. economy. If you look at the power consumption and the car market and any kind of the consumer market in China, so China has right now. There's going to be hard times, I'm sure. Chinese government is going to ask the Chinese people to make sacrifice. But whereas in the past, sacrifice means tighten your belt, ration your food. Today, making sacrifice means, okay, you need to get an extra phone. You need to buy one more car. You need to take a vacation.
It's like George Bush during the Iraq War. He was like, go out and buy stuff. Go out and buy stuff.
Exactly.
I saw, and to your point about money is fungible, or they can maneuver their markets to elsewhere. Soybeans coming from Brazil, they've stopped buying pork, apparently, hitting farmers. I mean, they canceled their order. And again, we're talking about 1.5 billion people. Like the power generation stuff, it should be. I mean, like logically, you're talking about 1.3 billion people compared to 300 million. You guys are 3 times, or China's 3 times the size of the U.S. anyway. So you would imagine as scale goes up. Well, obviously, they're going to have more electricity and they need it. More cars, they need it. The market, by definition, will have to be bigger, especially if you're talking about a larger burgeoning middle class. So that's something that's going to grow in general. I mean, so I don't doubt you because of how big China is in that sense and how big of an industrial base that they have bringing all of those people out of poverty. That is amazing. I think we are in for a rude awakening. And look, even the papers here, the Wall Street Journal talks about how Trump has lost the war, the trade war to China. So it's not just, like, I put it this way. Xi Jinping seems to be very calm. What's coming out of China is calm, resilience, resoluteness. What is coming out of the White House is a panicky, unclear strategy, like they just stumbled into a trade war. And it's almost as if they had no expectation that China was going to act this way. It's so bizarre. In their mind, China was just going to be like,
the Japanese delegate that came to Washington to do a deal that asked the Trump team, okay, what do you guys want? And the Trump team said, what do you have on offer? And the Japanese delegate were completely perplexed. They're baffled. They're like, we came to Washington to find out what you really want so we can find ways to accommodate you. And you came back and asking us what we want? It's like, it almost seems like you don't know what you really want. And this is why the Japanese trade delegations then left without reaching any kind of agreement, because they don't really know what the hell is going on. And this is why when the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, when he said, this is actually, we're playing three-dimensional chess. We laid a trap for China. We told people, if you don't retaliate, you'll be rewarded. And now all the other countries are going to be rewarded and come to deal with us. And we're going to form we're going to tell them not to do business with China. And Japan just publicly said, we're not going to do that. We're not going to sign on any anti-China economic trade bloc because our relationship with Beijing is too important. And this is Japan. This is Japan who, in the past, always go along with whatever U.S. says. Japan is like the good pupil of the United States, right? Like they always follow. If Japan now stood up and said no to United States, that means no country is gonna follow. No country is gonna follow suit now. We're gonna say, okay, let's make a deal. Let's not trade with China, especially when a lot of their countries, many of the countries around the world, their supply chain also depend on China. If they want to do manufacturing inside their country, I'm talking about Southeast Asian countries, where I'm right now, Vietnam, Indonesia. If they want to develop their manufacturing sector, guess what? They need to import machine tools from China. They need to import parts from China. And they're already part of the Chinese supply chain. And United States is asking them to cut themselves off without offering anything in return. They're not coming in to say, okay, here's shitloads of money. That's gonna be enough to compensate you for cutting yourself off from China. Now, United States is not doing that. It's all sticks. It's like, okay, if you don't do what we say, we're gonna put tariffs on you, right? There's no tariffs, zero tariffs. Whereas China's like, hey, we don't care if you want to trade with United States, it's fine. We actually prefer that you continue to trade United States. So you can take our parts, make these things, and you can export to United States. We're fine with that. In fact, we're very happy with that. And this is why Xi Jinping is in Southeast Asia. He's shoring up these relationships, and he's getting red carpet treatment in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Malaysia, and right now we literally have Chinese military, Chinese People Liberation Army Honor Guard marching in the streets of Vietnam right now as part of the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And they're singing Vietnamese patriotic songs, about as if the Uncle Ho is with us on the march to victory, right? And they are getting a hero's welcome by the Vietnamese. I mean, there are videos right now out now, like, you have this Vietnamese women lining up when the PLA honor guard is marching, and they're yelling, 老公, 老公 in Chinese, which means husband.
Wow.
These guys are getting catcalled This
No,
I mean this is Vietnam we're talking about. This is
yeah,
the
this is not even
Vietnam that
China.
some yeah, this is some people in Washington thought they could turn Vietnam as some kind of a to counterbalancing against China. They wanted Vietnam as a cornerstone of the contain China policy, and like Vietnam and China and Vietnam also they publicized for the first time the role of Chinese military during the Vietnam War. Um, the fact that China actually sent 300,000 PLA soldiers into North Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and they were manning the air defenses to guard all the bridges and railways that was connecting North Vietnam with China. That's why, despite American carpet bombing, they were never able to cut those vital supply lines that linked China to Vietnam because
Wait, nobody knew about this before. Just so clear, nobody knew.
People in the West don't know about this, and Vietnam, because their past difficulty with China, they didn't want to publicize this domestically, and now they're openly publicizing this. This is a big signal. This is a big signal shift. The Vietnam, they're like, okay, we're okay now. We're patching up our relationship with China, and Malaysia, they're rolling big red carpet for Xi Jinping and Malaysian Prime Minister. And Singapore's ministers, they're all criticizing Trump tariff at this point. Malaysia and Singapore, there's, especially Singapore. Singapore is supposed to be like the kind of Western outpost in Southeast Asia. And yet they are now criticizing Trump policies. So Trump is, you know how I on your show, I used to say the Asian century is already here today. Well, Trump saw that and he said, Jamar, F that. F the Asian century. We're going to bring in the Asian millennium. Start now.
While I was in Vietnam during one of those celebrations I think it was 2 years ago, 2023. I was taking my vacation, and just so happened it was during the Vietnamese celebration of winning the war. And they were like marching down the street. They were singing, because they call it Saigon. They never call it Ho Chi Minh in the country. Like, we were called Ho Chi Minh City, and they're like, no, this is Saigon, the way they talk about it. So, no, that's pretty amazing. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, Trump screwed up on this. I mean, he pissed off Europe. And so apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, Europeans or the European Union is supposed to go and visit China, or at the very least have a summit with China in May. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
EU is currently negotiating with China on removing tariff barriers between EU and China.
Amazing.
These are the things that Biden administration worked very hard to pressure the Europeans to do. For example, putting the tariff on Chinese EVs, and now they're talking about, what? Just kidding. I don't think I think we don't need the tariffs on the Chinese EVs.
Oh, this is such an unmitigated mistake. I mean, he is effectively, because from his point of view, all right, now I'm in a trade war with China, and I'm waiting for a phone call from China that will never come, right? Waiting for a train that never comes. And then he's like, all right, China's not giving me a call. Okay, let me work with the Europeans. Now, keep in mind, he's sent Vance over there to browbeat the Europeans. Vance has been on TV telling Europeans, I don't care what you think about Greenland, we're taking it. Like, so he has been marginalizing, emasculating Europe for the entire 3 months. And now it's like, we need to work with the Europeans to go after China. And Europe is like, maybe we want to talk to China. And again, Southeast Asia, same thing. Like, you're pissing off the world. And then you're expecting the world to join you to go after China, who is not going after the rest of the world with tariffs. I mean, those tariffs are supposed to reinstate.
And even Canada.
Even Canada.
And even Canada. Even Canada. Like
he keeps calling the 51st state.
The whole Five Eye network worked really hard, in Canada, claiming there's Chinese interference in Canadian connection, secret Chinese police station on Canada and all that. They whip up a whole, China scare for like few years. And now they're like, you know what? China is not so bad, compared to United States. And what happened? You know what happened? China has announced that they're going to, because of tariff, they're going to stop taking LNG and oil shipment from United States. China
That's right.
actually buys a certain amount of liquefied natural gas and oil from United States. They say, you know what? We're not coming to US anymore because Trump is slapping a port fee on any Chinese-built ships. They could be potentially getting $3 million port fee for every Chinese-built ship that calls on U.S. port. So China's like, you know what? Our LNG ships, they're not coming to the U.S. to take your LNG shipment. We're just going to go a little bit further north. We're just going to do it from Canada. So now Canada is making bam bucks selling LNG to China. And China stopped buying beef from United States. And guess who benefits? Australia is now doubling is increasing their beef export to China. So everybody's benefiting right now. Like someone pointed out, right now you can build a factory anywhere in the world and getting components and parts from China without 145% tariff anywhere in the world but United States.
That's right.
So US. So if you really think about it, how that works out, you actually put the U.S. industry in a distinct disadvantage because they're the only ones going to have to pay 145% tariff if they want to source any Chinese parts. Which, by the way, Detroit Big Three, a lot of the Chinese parts go into the cars made in United States. People don't realize that, but they do, especially the batteries, because China dominates the battery production. And this is why Trump is probably getting calls left and right now. It's like, okay, boss, you need to cool off on this tariff thing. Maybe like just delay a little bit, give us some time. I think what Trump could do, he can just cave but claim victory. A lot of the Trump supporters are going to believe him anyway.
How?
A lot of Trump supporters are going to believe him no matter what.
I mean, but how do you claim victory in this situation? Like, because everything you said is right. Everything you said is right. And it's a tax on Americans. Like, there was a reporting that Walmart was contacting Chinese businesses saying, hey, you need to cut your prices because of the tariffs. And of course, it's like, no, we're not doing that. Figure it out. Like, Walmart has made a business model selling Chinese products. So is Target. So is Amazon. He has screwed them over royally. And as you pointed out, all of those other supply chains, pork, Boeing airplane parts, soybeans. So Trump in the first one was paying farmers, effectively compensated them because the 1.3 billion people that they were selling to was basically off the table from that point on. Think of 1.3 billion people who pork. Again, the U.S. farmers screwed over, Boeing jets screwed over, Amazon, Target, Walmart, any of those type of businesses screwed over, 145%. Meaning either they mark that up and give it to the American consumer where they have to pay that on that product, whatever that price is, or they just don't sell that product, in which case you get empty boats.
The whole trade war not only was unnecessary, but it was based on false premises because they were looking at Trump was saying, "Oh, there's a huge trade deficit we have with China, right?" But they're looking at the trade figures basing on the import-export figures. Well, guess what? When the iPhone gets exported from China to United States, that counts as China's export to U.S. But in reality, China only makes about $60 off every iPhone. Majority of the iPhone profit get captured in Apple. So and also GM and also Apple. Apple consistently was selling about 70 million. They make $70 million in revenue in China every year, and those revenue do not get counted in the import export because those iPhone never left China. It just went straight from Chinese factories into the Chinese consumer hands. So those iPhone sales did not get counted in the trade surplus or trade deficit figures. And some people did a calculation. The S&P 500 companies, the big American multinationals, they actually make about $1,100 billion worth of revenue from China, which dwarfs the amount of the direct export, U.S. export to China. Because, you have GM. Remember, GM from 2009 all the way up to 2023, GM was selling more cars in China than they sell in the United States. But those cars do not get accounted into the trade figures because they are made in the GM factories in China and sold to the Chinese consumers. So GM was rolling in the profit for years, from 2009 to 2023. They're only getting killed more recently because of the Chinese competition. But for the longest time, they're making stupid bucks in China. Yeah. This goes with a lot of American companies. But again, their profit, their revenue do not get accounted for in the trade figures because they never leave ports of China, right? Because they're made in Chinese factories and they go into the Chinese consumer hands. But except bulk of that profit, just like Apple, they get captured by U.S. multinational and get distributed to their shareholders and their employees back in U.S. to support the research and development back in the U.S. And
so silly.
Trump is basically giving all that up. Trump is giving all that up right now.
It's so silly. I mean, it's so silly because you're absolutely right. Many of those are American companies, and even services aren't counted in the way that he is coming up with these figures. This is just a show of dominance. From the Chinese point of view, why do they think he's doing this? Has Chinese media talked about it, given analysis on what they think his motivation is? And do they think there's a larger motivation? Because I will tell you, there's some people who make this argument that Trump is trying to insulate the United States, meaning the two strands of thought. One strand is, okay, what Trump is saying is actually what he's trying to do, that he wants to create and foster American business. And the way he thinks about doing it is increasing the prices on Americans. So when you buy a particular product, you're buying an American product, and that company that makes that product is paying a particular wage, and that wage has to support an American worker, and so the prices have to be higher. And so by definition, he needs to drive up prices for American consumers. Now, he's not increasing the minimum wage. He's not doing anything to ensure those factories get built. He's not increasing the workforce and the education of that workforce to be able to do that job. And when you ask Americans, God, this poll was fascinating to me. They asked Americans, do you believe we should have more factories in America? 80% says yes. Would you want to work in a factory? 20% says yes. It's like, okay, so we want somebody else to work in a factory, but we want more factories, right? The logic doesn't quite work. And
it's that David Chappelle skit. I don't know if you've seen that David Chappelle skit. He actually, this was back 2018, I think, the first Trump term. He said, look, what the hell is Trump doing, man? I want to wear Nikes. I don't want to make Nikes,
right?
I don't want to spend $9,000 for my iPhone. Right. That's crazy. That's stupid talk. Just let the Chinese make iPhone and Nike for us.
So what do they think? The other strand of thought is Trump is preparing for a conflict, and in doing so, in the same way that Europe effectively was deindustrialized, because of the conflict with Russia, that he wants to barricade America from Chinese imports in order to ensure that if there's a conflict or a war, that we're not adversely affected. Where does China fall in this? What is the analysis in China on the reason that Trump is doing this? Is it just stupidity, or is there a larger five-dimensional chess?
By the way, what you said, this was actually the Pentagon talk points for a long time. The Pentagon says, well, our economy is too enmeshed with China. In case of war break out Taiwan, this is going to hurt us, if there's too much economic entanglement. So Pentagon has always been pro-containment and pro-decoupling, because their idea is, okay, once we cut through all these messy interdependence, it will be a lot easier for us to concentrate on war fighting against China. We don't have to worry about blowbacks, right? And but again, that's crazy talk. Right now, I don't think a hot war is going to break out anytime soon between U.S. and China. China is not interested in that. U.S. just lacks the means to do that right now. I mean, look, especially looking at the events, how it unfolded in the last few weeks. So from the Chinese perspective, I mean, they are looking at this as United States trying to roll back China's progress. The United States is like trying to keep China down. I mean, this has been the dominant view since 2018 when Trump first started sanctioning on China. Many Chinese saw that is the United States is worried about its position as a hegemon in the world, and they don't want China to continue to rise, so they want to keep China down. This is why, like a lot of the Chinese internet actually they're creating funny memes about this, right? They call it, the one of most popular meme is Trump is actually a secret Chinese spy. He was his main mission is to sabotage America, and he's doing a great job. And the other meme, they call him Trump the nation builder, except the nation in question is China, right? Trump is making China even greater. And so far, I can't say they're wrong about that. I mean, the event in the last few weeks, you actually saw the world public opinion of China have risen in the last couple of months, and this is all because of Trump. This is all because of Trump policy, and the whole thing is, like I said before, Jamar, a lot of the American problem with American empire is self-inflicted. I mean, this tariff war was totally unnecessary, and like I mean. I was
just gonna say they're fearful. They're freaked out. Like I think Trump, from his point of view, is they feel the breath on their neck, and they fear this kind of empire decline, and this is his response to it.
There's one very respected figure in the public intellectual in China who is specializing in international geopolitics, called Professor Zhang Weiwei, I think from Fudan University in China, in Shanghai. He said Trump actually in many cases correctly diagnosed the problem with the U.S. empire system. It's involved in too many endless wars. It's wasted a lot of resources and its international standing on pursuing those wars. This is why he tried to wind down Ukraine. And Trump also realized, there's a serious problem with deindustrialization in America. That's why he's trying to bring the industrialization, to reindustrialize America. Except all the solution Trump provided just make everything much, much worse. Worse than if he hasn't done anything. And so this is a Chinese public intellectual view of the Trump policies. And I think it's pretty spot on. I mean,
incompetence.
Rank incompetence. But you know what? There's another view, Jamar, because there were on Twitter, especially people when the Trump announced Liberation Day, there are a lot of people saying this is actually 4D chess because because what Scott Bison is trying to do, the Treasury Secretary, he knows that the bond, there's $9 trillion of U.S. Treasury that's maturing this year. The U.S. had to pay back, but U.S. obviously don't have the money, so they need to borrow more money to settle the old debt. But what they're trying to do is intentionally crater the stock market, so all the money from the stock market will have to flow to safe haven, which is the U.S. bond. That will bring the bond yield down, bring the interest down. So when U.S. goes to borrow money end of the year to pay the old debt, U.S. will borrow money with lower interest rate. Well, guess what? That didn't pan out because the
wait. Say that one more time. Say that one more time. Okay, you lost me.
So right now we all know U.S. have 37 trillion dollars. $37 trillion of national debt. But this is a rolling debt. Every year, some old debt come mature and you have to pay, right? So this year, there's about $9 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury that's coming mature. The U.S. government have to pay. Of course, U.S. government don't actually have the money. So what they do is they go to the bond market, issue more bonds. to borrow new money to pay off the old debts, right? So the idea of Scott Bison's genius idea, 4D chess, is that he will push the interest rate down by crater the stock market. So all the money leaves the stock market, and normally where they go into the US dollar, go into cash, or they go into the US Treasury. And when that happens, when the money rushes to buy US Treasury, it brings the yield or the short-term interest rate down, right? It will bring the interest rate down. So when US goes to borrow those money to pay off its old debt, US will be paying, lower interest rate on its debt. So that was a genius plan, except that didn't work.
That's why he's been yelling at Jerome Powell. That explains why he's been screaming at Jerome Powell.
Exactly. This is why as soon as they saw the bond market, it was broken, that there was panic selling of US bond, and that actually pushed the interest up rather than down. That's why Trump start backtracking a lot of these tariff issues, because they realize, okay, their magic is not working, and this is probably brought up by themselves, because a lot of sellings from Japan, and because they're putting a lot of pressure on Japan. And what happened was that actually made the Japanese yen go up, and the Japanese interest rate is going up. And for 20 years, Japanese is the first one who did the quantitative easing since their bubble burst in the 90s. So they have been printing a lot of money. They have very low interest rates. So all these hedge funds, they thought, wow, what a great idea. If we borrow shit tons of money in Japanese yen and invest in the US dollar denominated asset, we can get higher yield. We eat the difference. Well, it all works out until it doesn't. When the Japanese interest rate goes up, yen goes up, all these hedge funds realize, holy shit, now we owe way more than we just borrowed. Now we have to pay our debts. And the only way we do that is sell US treasuries. And that blow the Scott Bison's plan out of the water. And this is why we are in the shit show we are right now.
Speaking of Scott, Trump's Treasury Secretary, he really wants to help China out. He really wants to do you a favor. And he comes out with, as to be the biggest balls, like tremendously large testicles to make this speech. And I was sitting here like, I cannot believe he's making the speech. Like, he's effectively saying, we want to help China. The United States is really just trying to look out for China. We're trying to be a good neighbor to China. And we want to help them correct their economy and correct the way their model of economics in China. He literally says this in this speech. And I want to get your take on this. I was like, the balls on this guy. Like, you are literally having a trade war with China as we speak. And everybody knows that the United States is freaked out about China's potential economic dominance, all up to the point where Obama is trying to pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership in order to attack and go after China economically. And the Trump administration has been trying to do the Asian pivot for God knows how long, but he's stuck in Ukraine, so he can't do it, right? That's what his plan is, trade war against the world. Okay, listen to what he says here. And like I said, I want to get your take. This is fantastic.
China in particular, is in need of a rebalancing. Recent data shows the Chinese economy tilting even further away from consumption toward manufacturing. China's economic system, with growth driven by manufacturing exports, will continue to create even more serious imbalances with its trading partners if the status quo is allowed to continue. China's current economic model is built on exporting its way out of its economic troubles. It's an unsustainable model that is not only harming China, but the entire world. China needs to change. The country knows it needs to change. Everyone knows it needs to change, and we want to help it change because we need rebalancing too. China can start by moving its economy away from export overcapacity and towards supporting its own consumers and domestic demand. Such a shift would help with global rebalancing that the world desperately needs.
This is absurd. China has 1.3 billion people. the notion that the overcapacity, yes, they're supplying it to the world. I think he's talking about 5% of the world, which is just the United States. You give me your take. Give me your
I mean,
take. It's like everybody knows, all 5% of us, that China needs to change
this
their
is
economy.
like the gaslighting to the max. You know, he just I mean, look, he's talking about, you know, making benefit the consumer. You know what benefits the consumer? Have to be able to buy a $12,000 brand new car. You know, that's what you can do in China right now. I was in China. You can buy a very nice car for $12,000. You know, and for $24,000, you can get cars that feels premium. You know, have tons of features that's not available in, you know, cars you get in the United States. This is what is doing good for the consumers. But you know, the problem with Scott Bessent, he doesn't know China, and the information he's getting about China is from the likes like Gordon Chan, right? Who has been saying China is collapsing since like 2001, coming collapse with China, happening any day now, you know, maybe just next year around the corner. And this is why he says think like China is trying to export out of its problem. That's not what's happening. You know, China built up its productive capacity over the last 40 years, and right now they're I mean, the whole idea of somehow China is subsidizing its industry to dump on the overseas market, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like, look, if you think Chinese government is subsidizing those products they sell to America, then if you want to really hurt China, you need to buy more. So, you know, because Chinese government is not a bottomless pit of money, right? You know, they cannot keep this going forever. You know, you just make them produce, you know, dump more, make them subsidize even more. You will break the bank. That's what, you know, Scott Bessent actually did when he worked for George Soros Fund. You know, when they bet against the British pound sterling, right? I mean, but you know, back in 1997, 1998 Asian currency crisis, the George Soros funds, for which Scott Bessent worked for, they went after Hong Kong dollars. And at that time, China put its foot down. It's like, okay, we are the new landlord of Hong Kong now. We were not allowed you to do this. And they put their foot down and defended Hong Kong dollars. And George Soros funds lost shit tons of money. So I think they never forgave China for that. No. And this is like their kind of revenge, except he's running the U.S. government like he's running a hedge fund. And this is why we're in the big mess we are right now.
Carl, man, you're awesome. That's what got you out. And we have a great audience here. They love you to death. You have nearly 600 people listening at this point. Thank you for this. Great rundown. And yeah, I agree with you with everything you said here today. That is clownish. He is losing a trade war. And as he loses a trade war, he is standing up and saying, we just want to help China. We just believe in helping China. That's all it is. We have no ulterior motive. Okay, dude.
He's really saying, okay, please call me, Xi Jinping. Please pick up the phone. Please call me.
It's like, please don't call. By the way, in a closed door meeting, he was like, we can't keep this up. This is unsustainable. We can't keep this trade war up. He didn't say that to the public, by the way. He said that in a closed door meeting to other investors and all. Carl Jha, oh God, I don't think I gave you your intro. Let me give it now, your bio. Carl is host of Silk and Steel podcast, focused on China and surrounding regions and their history, culture, and politics. You can follow Carl on Twitter at Carl Jha. You can follow his podcast on Twitter at Steel Silk N, the letter N, and subscribe and support their podcast on patreon.com, Silk and Steel Twitter. Carl, is there anywhere else they can find you, by the way?
I do have my YouTube channel, just Carl Jha, so you can look it up. And I do welcome people to check out my Patreon channel, because that's where I do a more in-depth coverage of Chinese history from very beginning. I'm already up to like 450 BC. So
Are you?
I cover a lot, thousands of years of
450
history.
BC.
Yeah, I already
Wow.
covered thousands of years of history, my friend.
Well, 5,000, from my understanding. I mean, that's what the guy was saying. He was like, what did he say? We said, we've been around for 5,000 years. The U.S. empire will fall and collapse before he said, we'll be here for another 5,000 more. Like, that was their point of view. And I got to be honest, right? It is, I'm sorry to keep you longer. It is very hard for a country that is like 400 years old, or, less than 400, to kind of grasp 5,000 years. And how does China see the upstart in this? Like, it's very weird. Even the books go for this kind of long political arc. Like, the guy who wrote the book, Three Body Problem, he is talking about the arc of history. Even in Wandering Earth, they're talking about like governments lasting over the course of like thousands of years. We don't think that way. Our terms are like 4 years. It's just fascinating. Thank you.
What are you talking about? Quarterly reports, Jamar. Quarterly reports.
Right. Right. It's like that stuff is quick. We got to figure that stuff out fast. We don't have time for this kind of long arcs. Carl, man, thank you for this, man. I really do appreciate it. Good shout out to you, man. I really do appreciate it. You have a good one. Be safe.
Thank you, Jamar.